Hi, I'm Eric Light, and you're inside Chor Leoni. Hello and welcome to Inside Chor Leoni. My name is Eric Light. I'm the artistic director of Chor Leoni Men's Choir here in Vancouver, British Columbia, coming to you from beautiful St. Andrew's Wesley United Church in downtown Vancouver, our home. And we've got a lovely show for you today. We have as our guest composer Katerina Gimmon, but before we get to her, we want to play for you one of my all-time favorite pieces to be sung by TTBB voices. I have a little bit of a story with this one. I grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, and my high school choir director, Jim Hikes, did this with our men's choir. We were fortunate enough in my high school, in a town of 75,000 people, to have a men's choir of over 100 guys. And you can tell where I kind of got the bug. At any rate, this piece, this arrangement of the famous folk song Down in the Valley, in the original arrangement of it by George Meade, it has a piano part in it. But my high school choir director, Jim Hikes, decided, what if we just not use the piano part and do this a cappella? And I think this had to happen once when they had to sing someplace and there was no piano. And the openness and the vulnerability of the sound that comes out of taking away the piano part that was written there is truly extraordinary. It also gives the conductor a chance to really play with time in ways that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. I love this work because you hear the highest tenors, the lowest basses, the quietest singing possible, as well as the full roar of what a male choir can do. It's just one of my favorites, and a wonderful performance that we did at the Chance Center a number of years ago. So this is George Meade's arrangement of Down in the Valley.
So for me, the piece really is quite a soulful, meditative piece. And I find the harmonies, particularly in the bass section, particularly at the end of the piece, really resonate with me. Very rich tones, very meditative.
There's a way in which it's kind of a microcosm about what Chor Leoni does. Very simple tune, traditional tune, but in the hands of a master arranger like George Meade, it becomes something else, and there's a moment towards the end that I always just think is pure Chor Leoni, where they say, love who you will, but throw your arms round me and give my heart ease. And that's kind of what I think we always try to do and what we receive from our audience, this throwing of arms around us.
That was Chor Leoni singing Down in the Valley, a wonderful arrangement by George Meade. I adore doing that piece with those guys, especially at the Chan Center. It's a lovely thing. And I am so excited for many, many reasons. I have a guest today, and for the first time in the history of Inside Chor Leoni, we are in the same room. It's just crazy. But I want to welcome my guest, Katerina Gimmon. Hello.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, and to get to be your first in person. That's really exciting as well.
Yeah, in our place here. It feels very strange to me to not do this through the optics of Zoom,
I know,
just because
I
that's
can't
where it
mute
came from. No, right, or whatever. Just turn my camera off. Or,
exactly. Yeah.
Yes, is where we're at. You are becoming such a household name, especially with choirs in Canada, throughout North America. Let's just start there. Why choirs? Why are you writing for them?
Yeah, so I actually grew up singing in the Hamilton Children's Choir, just outside where I grew up, conducted by the amazing Zimfiropoulos. I joined, I think, about a year after she had moved to Canada and started conducting that choir. And I had no idea that it was a great choir. My parents didn't know. They're both accountants. It was literally just a friend had suggested it. And I joined that choir, and that was, the rest is history, basically, for me. I had always been interested in music, and everything didn't really fall in place until I found that choir. Mm-hmm. And I have this vivid memory that I will tell you. We went on a tour. We toured a lot with that choir. We were singing a concert in Germany. And for that first time, I think getting that feeling that everybody in choral music knows, or in music I should say, where you just feel entirely connected to the rest of the choir and the audience and everything.
The universe itself even.
Yeah, exactly. And I had never felt that before, and I was hooked from then, and I think in a way I kept writing choral music because I didn't want to leave choir.
You want to keep that buzz going. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was my sneaky way.
But not everyone that joins a children's choir then goes into composition. So what was that journey for you?
Yeah, so in a way, I guess I always wrote music. When I was really, really little, I loved to write songs about, whatever 4-year-old cat was interested in, bread, cats, whatever it was. I didn't really know it was writing music at the time. I just sort of loved making little lyrics and ditties. When I went on to study voice, I sang with an amazing vocal teacher, Linda Fletcher, who also happened to be a composer. She writes some choral music, but mostly art song. And she recognized that in me and encouraged me to write a little bit more, enter some festivals, Kiwanis festivals and whatnot. And then when I went on to do my undergrad, which was actually in general music, I took an elective in composition. And that was actually the first time I'd written a piece of choral music. I wrote a piece called Boundless, which, funny enough, is still performed today. And after that, I was like, you know what, I'm switching into composition. And I went from there, just kept falling down the rabbit hole. And here I am today.
Right. And that connection to choral music, I mean, it was just a synthesis then of what your musical music making background was, then meeting where the writing would that be fair to say?
Exactly, yeah. Because I guess the other thing I forgot to mention is so between that writing little ditties as very young cat and eventually getting to the point of studying composition more in the classical realm in my undergrad, I also was a songwriter for a number of years, and I think writing choral music for me became home. I found my instrument in a way. I think every composer, piano is my instrument, violin, whatever
Right.
it is. I discovered that my instrument was then actually my own voice. My instrument was a choir. And I think that was just because of how moving the experience of taking part, singing in this children's choir growing up was for me. The experience of being part of a choir, that community aspect and everything. I discovered that choir was in my instrument. So, yeah.
So when you're writing a piece of music, and you're writing things in all different styles, and we'll play stuff for folks in just a bit here, but what's the common thread? I mean, we have sometimes our ooey gooey choral moments where we all feel that connection there. We have things that are a bit more intense. For you, is there a common thread as you're writing that if I were to look hard enough in the scores or listen hard enough, that I would be seeing, hearing?
Yeah, I feel like that's always the hardest question for a composer. And I mean, I've been at this for, I think, almost 10 years now, and I'm starting to recognize some threads in my music, but I think over the life of composer that always changes. But I will say I've always been very interested in the environment that comes across in a lot of my music, mental health as well, women's voices. I've set almost exclusively texts by women, especially living poets as well, more recently. And I guess musically, I should also say I'm very interested in texture and timbre. I spent a number of years in my undergrad. Not only did I study composition, but I studied improvisation. And I think that also reminded me about my days in children's choir singing Murray Schafer, who's one of my bigger choral influences, I would say, and that all sort of connects and synthesizes, I think, in my music, because I enjoy that playful creativity and space for self-expression that I can leave people singing my music.
I want people to hear some of your music, and we're going to play a recording of University of North Texas, awesome choral program, really well-known choral program, doing your piece Fire. So tell us about this work. It's gotten out there quite a bit. Folks are singing that. Yeah. So first of all, what should people that don't know anything about this piece know, and what should people know that they can find out exclusively here talking to you right now about the piece?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do people not know? I think a lot of people don't actually realize this is the second choral piece I wrote. I talked earlier about the first piece that I wrote. That was my first year. I wrote this at the end of my second year of my undergraduate degree. It was my first SATB choral work, my first large-scale choral work, but second ever written. I had not really thought about a life beyond me writing it and having my university choir perform it. So I just said, you know what, I'm interested in improvisation and these cool things I can do with my voice. I'm going to think of the weirdest, wackiest things I can do, and a piece that I can try and convey an idea without using words. And so that's what I did in a set called Elements, Earth, Air, Fire. We're about to hear Fire. I wanted to write a piece that conveyed fire without saying fire. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Sure. And is there any text to this, or is it what are we?
No text. So one of my goals when writing this entire set was I didn't want to have any text. So I cheated a little bit in the second movement, air, because I have the word air in several different languages. But the piece itself, I wanted to be focused more on texture. So the words in fire, or words, are a series of, I have to say in quotations because they're nonsense syllables, essentially.
Phonemes,
phonemes. I was more interested in the actual, sound. I really like n's, and I thought of fire as, more nasally kind of thing, more uncomfortable maybe at time timbres. So I was looking for consonants. I was looking for things that would help get a nasal sound, more just thinking functionally, and thinking of what kinds of things sounded cool when I sang them myself. I guess one other thing I'll add about this piece that is interesting for people to know is this piece actually existed, all of Elements, as a choir of me singing it before I even wrote one note down of the piece. And I think once you hear the piece, it'll make a little bit more sense, because a lot of people get overwhelmed when they hear this and they're like, how did you even write that? I improvised the whole thing. I structured it in my DAW, funny enough, before I even wrote it.
You did as a multi-track versus pen and paper on the,
Exactly, because it's so much easier to hear the overall sense of, texture and how long should this go on and how everything fits together when you do it in that way. A lot of composers nowadays, I feel, often actually get limited working in notation software, and that's something I try and be careful of myself as well, because finale and it can only play notes. Actually,
Well, every
I should
medium
say.
of making music like makes you make the music that way. Like if you do Ableton or any of these
Exactly.
things, then you're held to the bar line. Like these are loops of
Exactly.
4 bars, or 4 beats or
It's
something
true.
like that. Yeah.
And I had one of my mentors, Linda Catlin Smith, who I studied with while I was at Wilfrid Laurier, gave me an amazing piece of advice. Always vary the process. And I
Right.
think for composers, that's one of the most important things you can do. Whether, you usually work in a DAW, and now you're going to work in notation software. Maybe you work with paper first. You should use a DAW. Always switch it up, because that's going to keep it interesting and stop you from going into the same kinds of things all the time.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's let folks hear this. This is Katerina Gimmon's Fire from her suite, The Elements. That was Fire by Katerina Gimmon, who is my guest today. Katerina, it's such a powerful piece. I think that when you stop people on the streets, when they say, well, what kind of music does a choir make? That's not necessarily what they mean, unless it's maybe like a big choral orchestral thing like Carmina Burana or something like that. There are a couple of those bombastic things, the Anvil chorus, maybe that sort of Joe Q public on the streets would be thinking about. And I think it's just so great to have what we're doing in our art form stretched in these ways. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
You are one of our finalists for our composing competition. So just so the folks at home know, every year we do a composing competition for composers in Canada. We had to skip a few years because, well, we all know why. But you got that under the wire from COVID, and you were supposed to be having this premiere and this competition happen in the spring of 2020. Well, here we are now, older, wiser, and better. We had applications from all over Canada, and the process is then I choose folks and bring 3 people together, and we just commission the work this year, and that's what we did. And the decisions on all of this for how you and I worked, coming up with or settling on where the focus of the piece was going to be, came in after the fact of the pandemic. So this was one of those pandemic pieces in many ways. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit about Bell Tower and its genesis?
Sure. Well, I think that you led a little bit into that with what you were saying, but the fun story about the piece is I had actually suggested originally to you a completely different poem, a completely different topic. And I was due to start writing the piece as soon as I came back from New York. Funny enough, I was in New York right when the pandemic broke up, had to run back home.
Great place to be at the
Yeah, great place
moment.
to be at that time. So that was fun. I was quarantining, dealing with a lot of stuff, and I listened to this wonderful podcast called On Being. And there's a lot of beautiful poetry and writing in that. And I forget exactly what the article or the episode was named that it was on, but I came across this lovely translation of a poem by Rilke, German poet. Let This Darkness Be a Bell Tower is the full title translation of that poem. And it was just a perfect description of, I think, what I not only what I was feeling, but what everyone was feeling at the time.
Right.
The beginning of the poem has this sort of weight to it, and almost to me felt like this beautiful kind of exhale and inhale, like this steady inhale and exhale, that feeling. I don't know if you remember at the very beginning, it was just this eerie silentness, when you're walking downtown, a place where there's usually all these cars and everything, and I feel like it captured that for me in a way. But the piece at its heart, or I guess I should say the text, is about understanding the meaning of pain and uncertainty in our world, which I thought was so poignant at that time. And so I asked you, and you were like, "Go for it," which I'm so happy.
It felt well. First of all, the Rilke poem is amazing. Translation was great. You could feel the music. Sometimes you just feel the music is already there, and it just absolutely seemed like the thing that was for me was that you just seemed so excited about it. And as a commissioner, I've now done, good God, it's probably like 500 commissions in my career now. It's been a lot, but it's always about trying to bring together the disparate aspects of this, the composer, a little bit of, my tastes, just a little bit, but then it's knowing who our audience is, knowing who the choir is, and it's just trying to triangulate all of that into something that's going to be where everyone feels represented and heard and all of this. And that, when you presented that to me, it absolutely felt like this is gonna feel really good in that way.
I think as an artist as well too, it felt very strange because I was very connected to the poem I originally suggested to you. It was an environmental theme piece. But it just felt like the world had been turned upside down, and it felt almost like I was writing in a foreign language. If I had written about that piece, it was still relevant, of course, this text that I had originally suggested to you, but it was like ignoring the elephant in the room, not addressing all the things I was feeling at the time, all the things we were feeling. So it was sort of a beautiful way that this piece ended up coming to life because of that.
Right. Yes. It's like you're worrying about minimum wage while the house is on fire. You have to. There's things that are of the moment that you that you need to address, and that was there. So this was, I think, one of the fewer pieces that you've written for TTBB Voices. I think you've done one for Canadian Men's Choir, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, I did one for Canadian Men's Chorus, and I have another one, actually, the Canadian Men's Chorus is doing at Podium, funny enough. But I'd only written the one, and it was sort of a higher level. I think when I originally submitted, I talked about how it was, the Canadian Men's Chorus is only about 10, 12 singers, so there's less of them, higher level, and I said, I want to write for Chor Leoni because I know you're such a strong men's vocal sound, and there's so many more singers. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm so interested in texture, and there's just a lot of things you can't do when you have that little amount of voices.
Right.
So, yeah.
So when people come and hear this at our C4 event in a few weeks, first of all, what would you hope that they hear? Like what should they maybe prime themselves to listen for? What were the things about this piece? Even our guys watch the show. So like what's the inside scoop on the way that you composed the piece?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess I'll say I've always been a very visual thinker. So as I read the poem and was thinking about the way I was going to compose the music, I like to think of images. And that was part of the reason I mentioned this idea of silence and of breathing earlier.
Right.
So as the piece starts, I tried to sort of capture that eerie silentness, that, trying to settle yourself with this breathing. So when you hear the piece open, it starts in that place, slight uncomfortability, but also trying to find a way to settle. And it's just this beautiful, quiet texture. That was one of the nice things about this piece, the journey it goes on. So I begin in this place, and then we slowly journey into this interesting place of self-discovery, and it almost swirls and turns and explores, and we get to the end, this beautiful, I like to call it the waterfall section.
Kind of a big coda on the
at the end of the piece where the text.
You think it could be it definitely could be over, but no.
It's not.
You have
to
miles to go before you sleep.
Exactly. It's the secret thesis of the piece that gets tagged on, and that was one of my favorite lines. It's to the silent earth I flow, I am. It's the final line, and it's just. I wrote that first, actually, funny enough. I knew what that was going to be, and I don't often do that. Usually I have pieces of everything else, and I knew where I was going to land. And I'd written this beautiful section of this waterfall of cascading. And what I say when I guess I should explain when I say waterfall. I have this repeated kind of melodic fragment that moves through all the voices, and they all repeat, I am, and it builds and it grows into this big resonant chord at the very end, and it soaks you up. So I hope when listening to this piece, audience members will get to go on that journey from this place of pain, discomfort, uncertainty, to this place of feeling hope. I think at the very end of it, and realizing that I can find hope. I can be confident that when I'm struggling with grief, when I'm struggling with uncertainty, I will get through it, and I will find love. I will find the other side of the coin. Yeah.
And it's wonderful. How wonderful is it that someone like Rilke is the one? We can go back a ways in time, and all these emotions are all the same. And yet this was something that's frankly still happening. We're not sitting that close together because there's still COVID going on. But and I think even at this moment, there may be some of even the darker moments of this pandemic happening at the moment that we sometimes don't even acknowledge or realize or want to. And yes, it's been. We premiered this piece in November. We sang it as a part of our Remembrance Day programs, and it was I think of all the texts that we did for a Remembrance Day program, it's probably about maybe the only one that sort of also encapsulates it worked well within the context of Remembrance Day, but it also really encapsulated how we were feeling, trying to come back into the singing. Still distancing, still masking, still the uncertainties of every single day of what can't we do, and all the rest of it. And I think it offered us quite a bit of hope in all of it. It's a heck of a sing too. We have to sort of gird our loins to be ready to make it through. It's a big sing, which was a really fun thing for us to do, and to come out with that much sort of especially for the ending, that much amount of vibrancy. For the end of the piece was a good thing to get us back on this horse and riding it while we're being in the active choir. So I'm really excited to share this with everyone in the context right where we're sitting here in a few weeks, and to let people the folks in the audience also be able to ask you these questions and the things that come to mind to them. It's a unique event that we do in the fact that we don't print programs, we just hand out scores for all of this. So I don't think you even knew that. So,
I didn't even know that.
Isn't that cool?
Okay.
Yeah. So, and we sing the piece twice. So, so it's like, it's a way that new music, I think it can really be heard and understood, or at least appreciated, in that very first and or second time. We just have this thing of like, oh, the premiere is the most important part, and I don't think the act of creation really ends at that moment. So yours has had a little bit of a shelf life with the choir, so we're really ready to sing it. So I can't wait to share it. I do want to share one more piece though with of yours. In Her Image, and it's a piece that you wrote. I think was this also a pandemical piece that you?
Just before the pandemic.
Just before.
2019. Yes. So, do you want me to just dive in?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Tell us about this piece, and maybe tell us about the video that we're going to see, because I think there's some really
Sirens,
striking.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so this piece was commissioned for Sirens in, I think they approached me in 2018. They were going to do their debut album, and they wanted to commission a new work for it. And funny enough, the piece, this keeps coming back, the piece that I talked about earlier, Boundless, the first choral piece I wrote, was the title track of their album. They were doing that piece of mine as well, and to fit the theme of their album, they wanted a new piece about empowerment, celebrating sisterhood, self-discovery, that kind of thing. And so I sat and I thought and I debated, and this ended up being the first piece of mine that I commissioned a poet.
Oh, sure.
I commissioned a poet. For a number of years, before that, I'd either written my own texts or I'd found public domain things.
Yeah.
But I started getting to this point where I was like, okay, I feel this strange disconnect between the kinds of things I want to write and I can't find public domain, but I'm too afraid to approach poets. A bit of growing pains, I guess I'd say, as a composer. And my partner pointed out, well, obviously, you just need to approach a poet. These things that you just don't see in your brain at the time when you're thinking them. So I thought, oh yeah, you're actually right. And my good friend Lauren Pete, who I grew up singing in the Hamilton Children's Choir with, is poet, lyricist. And so I approached her and I said, would you be interested in doing that? And she said yes. And funny enough, we've written a number of pieces together since then. But she came up with this beautiful text called In Her Image, all about, it describes this person, the lyrics are almost in sort of this Joni Mitchell-esque kind of style, very beautiful storytelling, who is searching for themselves, and they move, from a pond to a glade, and as they're looking for themselves, they end up further and further away, and then they discover at the end that it was actually where they started at the beginning, that they'd strayed, and that it was there all along. So it's this beautiful story of self-discovery, but also self-discovery within the context of just your community as well. So it was a way to celebrate the community of Sirens Choir, the choir that this piece was for. And they ended up coming up, or I should say they recorded it just before the pandemic. I think December 2019 they recorded it, and they made a video in, I think, April or June of the pandemic, because we had to figure out how we were going to do it now that it couldn't get premiered. And they made this beautiful video with mirrors and everything that we're about to see. But this piece is really starting to, I think, take on some new life. So I'm excited to see where it'll go now.
It's fantastic. I want to thank you so much for joining us, for writing this wonderful piece that we're going to share with everyone in a few weeks. It's just been great, and I hope this is just the beginning of our relationship, with you and the choir with Chor Leoni. It's just it's been a real joy. So thank you.
Of course, yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So this is In Her Image, sung by the vocal ensemble Sirens.
Till I had all but lost her image. When something in me settled and glanced back, something in me settled and glanced back.
That was In Her Image, sung by the Siren Ensemble, music by Katerina Gimmon. Great video, great piece of music, and we are just feeling so fortunate to be able to sing some of Katerina's work and to actually have her here in the flesh, live. It's totally weird. At any rate, links are down below if you want to try to attend that event. It really is something. It's a really great way to experience new music, to have the composers there, have the scores in front of you, and just be able to really commune with everybody as we create some new music. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.